welcome back to another episode of Talkers on the Wall. Today
Yo.
I am hosting the intro with my good friend here, Cole. And today we are going to be talking about what we think makes a good horror movie. And by that, just things we look for in a horror movie and then when we are enjoying the horror movie, essentially.
Yep.
I think I have it boiled down to at least 3 or 4 points. I think Cole's got to have it probably down to about the same. We're not going to make this a super long video, but yeah. If you want, do you want to start this off?
Yeah. So, I'd say let's go, if we're going to be talking about, like, horror movies.
Yep.
No matter, like, what, like, monster dealing with or supernatural threat.
Yep.
It boils down to story over gore.
Yeah, I agree.
And really, I feel like with horror movies, like, most people will give them the benefit of the doubt if they make the effort to have character arcs with the the victims of it.
Yeah.
And not like all of us are gonna care about it, but like I feel like a good version of that, a good example is Barbarian.
Oh yeah.
Came out I think like 2022, 23.
Yeah.
And as much as you might not care about like the monster or like the barbarian. But the plot twist is crazy, which that's going to be into one of my other points.
Yeah.
But, just making you actually, like, somewhat care about the threat and about the characters, too.
Yep.
Is, it goes a long way than just being like, yeah, cringy sex scene, monster kills them.
Yeah, no, like, for me, when it comes to horror movies, I do not like slashers at all. It's probably, like, my least favorite genre, honestly.
Yeah.
But I would say my first main point for a good horror movie then is to don't kill every single character. I hate that at the end of a horror movie where everybody dies, and it's just like you're just watching people get murdered, basically.
Yeah.
I need, like, good character arcs. I need to see, the characters, go through a change or something. Even if it's just like 1 or 2 people live, that's fine. I just want somebody to live. I want there to be a point of having watched it. Good horror movies that do that, I feel like, are, like, the most recent example I can think of is Aliens Romulus.
Yeah.
Like, almost everybody dies, but the girl and the robot survive. And they have, like, an ambiguous fate, but they at least survive. I feel like I could go back and rewatch it because there's like a point to me watching. I'm not watching this just to see a bunch of kids get murdered. You know what I mean?
I'd say Romulus does a really good job of that, and I've actually I feel like as far as like how good the story is.
Yep.
Also determines the replay value of like how you want to get back into it.
Yeah.
Because like I'm just thinking of like a bad, like, this might be a hot take.
Yeah.
The Scream movies are not that good.
You don't think so?
I really don't.
Well, they're supposed to be like meta, right? They're like a parody of slashers at the time.
But I mean, yeah, I actually didn't know that. But just slashers in general, like you said, like probably one of my least favorite genres, like you said.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, I feel like that just ruins replay value for me personally.
Yeah. Like, what about Scream don't you like, I guess?
It's just the characters are boring. Like, they just don't really, like, try. Like, it's just like...
I guess that's fair.
They just build off the hype of, like, especially the newer ones.
Well, I haven't seen the newer ones, to be fair. Have you seen the originals?
I've seen, like, the ones with, like, Courtney Cox and all that. Yeah.
I feel like... it's a tangent, but I feel like Sydney's a good, like, final girl in the original movies. But yeah, that's fair. I understand what you're coming from there. And I agree, too. Like, having all the characters be hateable in a horror movie kind of hurts, for me at least.
Yeah.
So I watch, like, a horror movie for, like, 1 or 2 reasons. One, either kind of the unraveling of the mystery of the horror is, like, a big appeal to me. So, like, thrillers and stuff like that, I still kind of see as horror movies.
Yeah.
And then also, like, if they just got really great character arcs. Because I feel like horror movies can do either a really great mystery or it's about the character.
Okay, so that is a very good point. I would say, like, not, like, having the hindsight of watching the movie.
Yeah.
As a trailer, what would get you to watch a horror movie?
For a trailer, I think just a mystery.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing is, like, the mystery. Like, do the characters seem believable, I guess is another thing. But mainly, it's that mystery factor. Like, when I go to see a horror movie, mainly I'm going to go and see it because I want to know what the horror is. Like right now, a really good one is called Murder or something. It was like The Toys or something like that. But it's by the same director as Barbarians.
Oh, are you talking about like the monkey movie?
No. It's like a trailer, and it's like all these kids go missing at exactly the same time at night, and the only thing they all have in common is they attended the same like third grade teacher's class. I can't think of what the movie's called, but I'll edit in the title if I can think about it.
Yeah.
But I watched that trailer, had me hooked. But yeah, that's the biggest thing is like the mystery is what brings me into a horror movie.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'd say honestly, like, it's not more so a mystery, but like it's gonna sound very 2025, but like the aura of like the like what the monster is like
the ambiance.
Exactly like that. As far as like the biggest thing I can think of is obviously Nosferatu. We both loved it.
Yeah.
Like
I guess that's fair.
Watching the movie, like, I'm not trying to make this another Nosferatu review, but the chill of like you don't know where Thomas is going. Like I mean, you know where he's going, but you don't really know how he's gonna get there.
Yeah.
Like when he's meeting like the cult or whatever, and then he gets to the castle and it's just chilling.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it just not going back to get away from slashers. Build suspense through your plot.
Yeah, I agree. No, that is a good point, actually, because now that you bring that up, it's the mystery, but also the ambiance. Because when I watched the Nosferatu trailer at the time, like, I knew the Nosferatu story, so it wasn't, like, the mystery that hooked me. It was definitely the ambiance and the aura that, you know, the trailer brought. Like, the creepiness I felt after watching the trailer. So that's actually a very good point, too.
Yeah.
I'd probably be, like, that is probably tied or maybe just below the mystery aspect for me.
And another thing I'd want to say too, and it's not fair to new directors, I'm gonna be completely honest.
Yeah.
But if a renounced director or producer like Robert Eggers takes over like a mythology of a horror like movie, or Nolan does it, or even Tarantino, you know it's gonna be good.
No, that's very fair. Yeah. Like some people will just go and see a Robert Eggers movie not because they're necessarily interested in the source material, but because they've liked other Robert Eggers films. But and a trailer can really sell an audience too, because for example, the Sinners trailer, like that's a new director, at least to me, and he made like a really interesting trailer, at least the very first one. The second and third trailer kind of gave away too much of the story. But that first trailer really gave you the horror, gave you the mystery, and it made me kind of want to come back and watch it.
Yeah. Another thing I want to bring into the horror game is, actually I was going to talk about horror games, but the score of the movie matters. Like I can't even tell you how important it is. Like Glazing Nosferatu again, the score is amazing. Like, if you just make an impact with just your score and make it like involved with the plot to where you can think of like a certain, like you can remember a scene by like the music. Like Nolan does this really well, going a little bit outside of horror, but the score matters immensely. A whole movie can be based off a vibe. I mean,
kind of what you said earlier with Nosferatu, like there's not very many jump scares in that movie, if at all, but with the score and the directing, it's like it builds that creepiness factor to a maximum until you are literally crawling in your seat. Like you're like, oh, I got like crazy goosebumps. I would much rather have a movie creep me out than, I guess, scare me with a jump scare.
Exactly, 100%. Yeah.
I want to feel like unsettled. Yeah. That's what brings me back to another horror movie. I would say that's another thing that makes a good horror movie, is that you feel unsettled, not necessarily scared.
I agree. Like, just another thing I would like to mention too is making horror movies grounded.
Yeah.
Make it real as possible. Make the characters have real conversations, real problems with each other.
Yep.
This turned into a horror movie, and I'm very sad that it did.
Yeah.
But Until Dawn did a really good job of this in the game. I'm gonna say that in the game. Stay away from the movie.
Are you gonna go see the movie?
I mean,
I've heard it's not very good.
No, I mean, I made a trailer review on it.
Yeah.
And I can't believe how they just abandoned the source material.
Yeah. But I agree. Some of my favorite horror movies, like, for instance, get to something new that we haven't talked about yet, The Ritual on Netflix. That movie is it's as much dealing with grief as it is about the horror.
Yeah.
You know, the main like the turning point in the story is and these guys, one of their friends dies viciously from like a mugging basically, and they're dealing with the grief of that, and that is mixed so well into the horror. But yeah, I agree that make it grounded. Another thing with slasher movies too is like it's so unbelievable,
over the top.
Yeah, and it's like when you get to a certain point with like things like Michael Myers, it's like, how's this dude not dead? He's just like a person, right? And he's getting shot and stabbed, and he's throwing people like 20 feet, and that does take me out of the movie.
Yeah, I would say, actually, you go for it. I've kind of just unloaded the clip on just horror ideas and what makes them good.
Basically, I mean, I think we share a lot of the same thoughts. I think a big thing for me too is what really got me into horror more so is horror literature.
Yeah.
And so the big thing with horror literature is that they mix in like real world horror with your fantasy horror. So like The Ritual, for example, it takes the grief of losing, like a best friend or a loved one or something like that, and mixes it in with, being chased down by this mythical beast in the forest type of thing. Some other horror, that does this, you could, take Sinners, for example. There's the horror of the vampires trying to, kill the people inside, but there's also mixed in on the side of that the horror of 1930s racism and the class divide, and Jim Crow laws and all that. Things with like Nosferatu, I would think that there's the the plague and the vampire horror, but there's also the horror of I guess I felt like in Nosferatu there was a big sense of like I can't think of the main woman's name.
Ellen.
Yeah, Ellen. Yeah. She was like being like put into like a role basically, like nobody would take her seriously, and like people just kind of thought they were crazy. Yeah. So there's like that real world horror of like being misunderstood and nobody like understands you, that sort of thing. Those are like the biggest things. So yeah, having character arcs, making me care for the characters, a good mystery, but also like ambiance as well. Those are like the biggest three things that I come back to. Trying to think of like some horror movies I've kind of rewatched.
Well, you can think about it. I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Now,
this active.
Now, the question I had was, because we've never really seen this before in horror, whatever, thrillers, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
How would you feel about a certain like horror movie be divided up into two parts? Now,
what do you mean by that, I guess?
So, like, you have a setup movie, like, it has to be done perfectly well, like, to where people are interested, but then part two is just where everything like kind of goes crazy, to where you have a whole movie of build up, to where you can get invested in characters, and then it just comes in at part two. It would be a big risk.
I feel like that would be more. I think your idea would be better done in something like a TV show or like a miniseries rather than a movie. Just because the gap between movies is so long.
Yeah. Like,
you might lose a lot of people if your first movie is just kind of like character building, I guess. But I do see what you're saying. Well, I kind of thought you were saying at first is that like you have like a series of movies, like kind of like Scream has like multiple.
Yeah.
Like you have one big movie that sets up a bunch of tropes, and then another movie that like breaks them all. Is kind of what I thought you were going for.
No.
But I would enjoy that because I guess you could think about that in like, because horror literature is like that for a lot of it, where the first 20 to 30 pages is basically just, a slice of life, real life, book or something. And then in the last, 10, 20 pages is where the real horror comes in, at least for short stories. I do think it could be done well. I don't know about two entirely separate movies, unless the horror was lurking in the background of the first one.
You could almost turn it to like a theoretically... Like, the first part is a detective movie, and then the second part is, like, holy shit, like, we found it, and now we have to deal with it.
Okay, I think in that aspect, that would be much better. Because then in the first movie, it's basically the whole mystery, and then the second half is where kind of, like, the killing comes more.
Yeah.
Because I guess you could do, like, the first movie is them investigating the previous murders, and then the second movie is them, like,
You could end it as a cliffhanger of, like, holy shit, we found it, bam, end the movie.
Yeah, I think that could be good. It would really have to be something like big, though, I guess.
Yeah.
And
like the Michigan Dog Man.
Yeah, exactly. The Michigan Dog Man movie could pull that off, I think. But no, I like the idea. I think that's good. Because Because there are some movies that have done that in a way, I guess. Because I know that there's, I can't think of anything other than, like, I guess Scream, for example. Scream builds off a lot of its narrative. I was going to say The Strangers, but I actually haven't seen those, so I don't know how connected those are.
Yeah. You could... Big stretch would be Stranger Things. Like,
yeah, that would kind of be like the show sort of thing I was kind of saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you're saying there. But I like the idea. I do.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? Is there anything else that you think can like add to a horror? Like what brings you into a horror? I guess another big thing for me I want to add really quick is that when I leave the theater, I want to like be thinking about the movie for a long time afterwards. You know, like every now and again I'll still think about Nosferatu, stuff
For
like
sure.
that. Yeah.
Well, there'll be times where like I'm writing and I'll put on the Nosferatu score because I want to get that chilling, like I want to get in that mindset of like, okay, I want I want this to be a mystery. I want this to be like I don't know what this next character is gonna think of or see.
Yeah.
The last thing I would say is I kind of referenced this earlier, but getting true video game adaptations into a horror movie would be super cool. If I could like see a really good Resident Evil adaptation, like done right, oh my god, I'd be glazing that thing to like no end. Like for me personally, my nostalgia, the first one I played was Resident Evil 7.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a first person, so it's kind of hard to do that, but I mean, you just not make it first person.
Yeah.
But I would love to see like Ethan Winters like go through the house in Louisiana.
Yeah.
It'd be super cool to see.
It's definitely hard, I think, between translating, I guess, video game horror to like movie horror, because I feel like a lot of the horror that comes from video games is you interacting with the game, you know? Like a lot of video game horror is more so like jump scares or like you're really immersed in the game because you're playing from like a first person experience, you know?
But wouldn't you say you were immersed in the story in like Nosferatu? Like you could.
I'm just saying like it'd be a hard transition.
Yeah, it would.
Because like a game does it a lot differently than a movie does, I guess. Because a lot of the horror from like a video game comes from me like making my own decisions, I guess.
It's just true. I also feel like more so like in a sense just make it suspenseful instead of like
action.
Yeah, actiony.
Yeah.
Like you could very well do that.
But no,
it doesn't have to be the scariest movie in the world. It can just be a good story.
I would love to see like the story of Resident Evil, like Biohazard, and then Resident Evil 8 get adapted. I think that would be really cool. I would just really want to see how they would get that done.
Yeah.
I agree though.
That's pretty much it. I'm empty in the chamber right now. Yeah,
I think I listed off like the biggest things for me. You know, ambiance, the mystery, keep characters alive. Because if none of the characters survive, I don't ever feel a reason to go back to the movie, or I feel like I wasted my time because I just watched these characters get murdered, and what was the point? You know. Because I always feel like a story should be the most, like, you should be telling the story of the most interesting thing that happens with, like, the killer or the monster, you know what I mean? So if I watch, like, a slasher movie, and I'm like, oh, like, every 10 years he kills 8 people, and then, you know, I watch a movie where he kills 8 people, and then that's the end of the movie, I'm like, I want to watch the movie where he doesn't get the 8 kills. What happens if he doesn't kill the 8 people? Like, what would that look like? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's my last thing. And then a biggest thing is just like, you know, that leave a mark. Leave something to the imagination. Another big thing for horror movies is when they show too much. I feel like a lot of the horror, you know, gets lost out. Because like a big thing in Nosferatu is that like a lot of it was in shadow. You don't always see Nosferatu in his grand glory, but it leaves just a little bit of something to the imagination.
So a big thing with horror is that less is more sometimes.
Oh yeah, for sure. I agree. It's definitely more scary when you see the monster just running around in the shadows than when you get a big like flash of it. I think when you do that, it should be near the end of the movie, like final act.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's all I basically have to say about it. I think we are out with that then.
Mm-hmm.
Peace out.